Estamos muy contentos de tener hoy aquí a Larry para que nos cuente cómo están viendo el gobierno de Trump y qué está haciendo la clase trabajadora en ese país. Bienvenido, Larry.
Gracias, Cecilia. Gracias, CLACSO. Buenos días, compañeros y compañeras. Resistencia es importante, pero no es suficiente. Mi español es malo, entonces yo voy a hablar en inglés. Sorry. So yes, I work with our revolution. Our revolution is 600 groups across the United States and some elsewhere. And the whole idea of it is, yes, we fight Trump, but that's not sufficient. In order to beat Trump, we must be for something. And so what are we fighting for, as well as what are we fighting against? And so that for us is not new in the United States. So when I was very young, 50 years ago, I was in the resistance. We were fighting racism, where I grew up in Philadelphia, in the streets, literally, and we were fighting against the U.S. war machine in Vietnam. Resistance is not new for me, and in our country, resistance goes back to the beginning of the Constitution, where they made slavery part of the Constitution. The fight against slavery, the fight against racism, the fight against the 1% is not new. That is the entire history of the United States. As Christina said so well yesterday, we have, many of us here, an 18th century government structure. It was set up against feudalism. Now we are in the 21st century. The structures themselves, what we call the rules, are a problem as much as Donald Trump is a problem. Cecilia said at the beginning that Trump lost the popular vote by 3.5 million. Nowhere else in the world that calls itself democracy does somebody lose an election by 3.5 million and they win the White House anyway. Last week in the midterm election, people voted against Trump's Congress. The total majority was more than 2 million. There now is a majority against Trump in the Congress, the House of Representatives. But in the U.S., unlike most democracies, we cannot govern. All that Congress can do is fight back, and that is something. We can stop Trump with that Congress, but we can't move forward. So, we must fight on two fronts in the U.S. First, and they're connected. First, we need new rules for a 21st century democracy. We cannot create the vision that we all share in this room with rules like we have in the United States. Christina said yesterday the judiciary. The judiciary in the United States, as hard as it is to pass legislation, a judge can throw it out. One judge. Supreme Court threw out the election in 2000 and gave it to Bush. But for us, it's not just the judiciary. It's how the president gets elected, not by the people, but by what's called the electoral vote, state by state. It's how the U.S. Senate operates, not just that every state, whether it's California or Wyoming, gets the same 2 votes, but it takes 60% to put a measure on the floor in the U.S. Senate. These rules go on and on and on. The right wing has worked on these rules in the United States since 1954, when we won a decision in the Supreme Court that schools could not be separate. They must be integrated. They started then in that fight. The right wing, they have never stopped. They have unlimited money, and they are working on the rules all the time. And all too often, we are focused only on candidates. As you heard, I worked with Bernie Sanders for the last 3 years. Our revolution, which I chair, is directly from the groups from that election, saying that it's not enough to have a candidate, we need to have a movement. A movement means people, black, brown, and white, working class people united to fight back, not just resist, but change the country in every town, in every community, in every state, and across the country, one day. So yes, A broad front in the United States stands up against Trump. We stand up against his brutal racism. We stand up against white nationalism as a failed strategy from the last century. But we also have a specific vision, like we were painting together on the wall, a specific vision of black, brown, and white working class women and men transforming our country. We are building a popular movement, and that word popular is very similar to how Christina used it or how Chantal just used it. We are building a popular movement so that we can appeal not only to the people who think like we do, but to some, a minority, but some of the people who vote for people like Trump. Some of them can be moved. Some of them had voted for Obama and then voted for Trump, and now in the last election voted for someone who opposed Trump. And what does that popular movement stand for? Very short version. Number one, workers' rights to organize, workers' rights to bargain, workers' rights to go to work and have rights on the job. The United States is at the bottom. 10% of workers in the United States have rights at work. 10%. That's lower than any other democracy in the world. Number two, public health care for all. This seems like modest to some of you. Public health care for all, not private insurance. That's what was passed in the Obama government. We have the most expensive health care in the world, 20% of gross domestic product on health care, and yet most of us don't have adequate health care. Education, number three. We have no child care education. It's all private. It's expensive. For many working women, it's half of what they make. They must pay to take care of one or two children. We used to have, when I was young, university education, not all over, but some places, with no tuition. You still have that in Argentina. Now in the United States, a public university is $20,000 a year just for the tuition. So number three, education. Number four, global justice, not the U.S. war machine. In 10 years, we spent almost $8 trillion on what they call defense. That's not defense, that's offense. And what has that done for the world? And finally, number five, convert our wartime economy to a Green New Deal. A Green New Deal, where we can imagine a New Deal. A Green New Deal, where we can imagine and have 100% renewable energy, instead of a president and many of the Congress who think, oh, we don't have any problem with climate change. We must spend trillions of dollars in the U.S., not on the war machine, but on converting the economy, decent work, and creating a green economy with renewable energy. So that's what we're fighting for, and we all know what we're fighting against. We will fight Trump. We will defend our rights. But we will also lead an attack, just like on a football field, not just defense. Attack. An attack for justice with real goals. And we say in the U.S., in English, obviously, what do we do when we're under attack? We stand up, we fight back. We stand up, we fight back. We stand up, we fight back. Muchas gracias.